Hey ladies, welcome to the I'm Her podcast. I'm so excited. What are you doing?
I'm scratching my eyebrow.
Because you're cringing.
That's all I'm doing.
Just be normal.
I'm trying
Let me
really
do
hard.
This.
I'm being normal.
Okay, 3, 2, 1. Hey ladies.
What else do you want me to do? I just gotta
You're
hold it.
gonna wait.
I am waiting. Okay, I'm gonna look down.
This is just the intro. They're just like cutting this part for the beginning.
Okay,
And
go
then there's
ahead.
gonna be an outro. Do you want to do the intro?
I don't. But just let me. Don't.
But
just
you're still
ignore me.
smiling.
I cannot help it. You're so beautiful.
Okay, look at the corner. 3, 2, 1. Hey ladies, welcome to the I'm Her podcast. My name is Bekah and I have my husband here, Elijah, who's not looking. Hey ladies, welcome to the I'm Her podcast. I'm super excited to be here. We are filling in for our mom, Pastor Lisa Kai, and we are super excited because we get to talk about ministry, marriage, and the marketplace. And so my name is Bekah. I am Pastor Lisa's second oldest daughter, and this is my husband, Elijah.
What's up?
And we lead the Inspire Young Adults here at Inspire Church.
Yes, we do.
And so we've been doing that for the last year and a half now. But Elijah, tell the world who you are. What do you do?
I'm Elijah Langofuaina, and I am the Young Adults Director alongside my wife, as she had spoken on earlier. And I'm also one of the worship directors alongside Darian Telez and Grayson West.
Let's go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if anybody here who is tuning in, you are a young adult, you go to Inspire Church or you're in Oahu and you want to come check us out.
Come on down.
We have young adult service every Tuesday night at 6:30 p.m. And it's been amazing.
Come on, tell them what we got, baby. We got food.
We got food.
Free food.
Free food.
So if you're broke, come on down because we got free food.
If you're a young adult.
If you're a young adult.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we do everything from worship to a message to connect groups.
Yeah.
But I'm excited because Pastor Lisa has entrusted us with her podcast platform today. And we just had young adults last night and we did a relationship series and it was super fun. And I'm excited because today we get to talk a little bit more about relationships and ministry and just even what you do. And so tell everybody who you are outside of ministry. What do you do other than ministry at Inspire Church?
I'm an artist. I'm a reggae artist, singer-songwriter, and my stage name is Johnny Sweet.
Yes, that's right. Mrs. Sweet, that's me.
That's her.
And so we're going to talk about today just a little bit about the marketplace, the industry, what that looks like, and also what does it look like to stay in alignment, especially being in ministry and the marketplace. I think for me, one thing that I really pride myself on, and I say this a lot to even you, is I pride myself in being able to do both. And I think that is kind of like what kickstarted just the whole ministry and the marketplace, or ministry and music, as I like to say, is when we started dating. And I think a big thing too is like always asking ourselves, even in this period of dating and then period of soon to be married and then now being married, the biggest thing that like we always talk about is how can we do both. And I think in the beginning we always like thought we had to choose between doing one or the other, being in full-time ministry or being a part of the marketplace and being in just an industry that not many people are in. And so I think like, what is that for you? Like, what was your concerns? What was your background in ministry, your background in the music industry?
Well, at first, I think growing up in a Samoan church, it was always kind of frowned upon to dabble in both worlds. And people have always thought like, oh, you're playing music for the devil because you're not doing worship music or you're not doing hymns at the clubs or at the bars. And it's everything is definitely optics, right? Like they're looking at where you're at, like, and people, and maybe your parents or whoever is your guardians were afraid of who would be judging you or judging the church if they seen you playing at a Friday night club or Saturday night bash and then Sunday you're on praise and worship. So it was kind of frowned upon in a lot of cultures. I praise God that even being in ministry late, that I didn't necessarily have that skewed view of it. Because at the end of the day, my life started to change the moment I started to join the worship team.
Wow.
And my whole perspective on it all changed, where like before Christ, when I started this Johnny Sweet journey, my branding was so different. Where like, man, if I'm just gonna be real, like I wasn't writing godly songs.
Right.
It was very raunchy, and that's kind of what my old management team was trying to make me to be. Or the producers I was working with, they wanted me to write songs about, women and drugs and stuff like that. And as I was beginning my journey with Jesus, I started to realize, like, yeah, these might be the songs that's going to get me popular, but is that the type of message I want to use for my platform?
Wow.
Especially because God had just taken capture of my heart. So it's like, God has given me this voice, given me this gift, not just given, but entrusted it to me.
Right.
What am I going to do with it? And here I am in this meeting where I'm offered a big contract to put out these songs. And I said no. And it was hard because you and I were just friends at the time. And I remember I called you.
Right.
And I was like, what is this feeling I'm getting? And you that's when you told me about conviction and discernment.
Right.
And I'm like, I really want to sign this contract. This is like everything I've worked for, to be able to go on a big tours and be under this big label and release all these great songs, worldly songs. It's what I've always wanted. But it's crazy how the more you seek after God and you grow in your relationship with him, the desires of your heart starts to change.
Right.
And that's exactly what happened. So I went from writing those types of songs to saying no to this big deal, to them dropping me, to me starting from the ground up, starting to write songs that God started to put on my heart to write.
Yeah.
Songs about growing as a man, songs about waking up and being grateful, songs that encourage you, that uplift you, that motivate you, that inspire you to be the best man or woman that you could be, that God has called you to be. And those are the types of songs that God put on my heart to write. And it wasn't necessarily very popular per se, but it's definitely created my identity. And though I might have a stage name, like most people who know me will tell you that on stage, Johnny Sweet or Elijah, it's the same guy no matter what.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of helped me a lot to really build my brand to where it is today.
I think that's one thing that I appreciate about even just like what you have created, but what we've created as being married, is that we have stayed true to who we are.
Yeah.
And I think that was the biggest thing. Like when we did get married, and obviously I knew that I was marrying you and what you do, like what was attached to that, which is the industry and Johnny Sweet. And I think when we did get married, I remember just talking to you and I said, I know I want to be in ministry. And like, but I also know that like there's a call of God on your life too. And this was way before you even hopped on staff. This was like before we were engaged or we're beginning to get engaged. And I remember us talking and sitting down, and I told you, I said, I know that I'm called to ministry, and I don't know what that looks like for your life, but I also know that there's a call of God on your life too. And I think like the biggest thing that we always dabbled in is because you don't see it. Like we don't see a bunch of people who are in ministry, but also who are musicians and who are well-known musicians and ones who do it well. Like, let's be honest, ones who do it really, really well and who are devout husbands and like followers of Christ and who serve in their church. And I think honestly, I'm not just being biased, but you are one of the very few people, I don't even know another person right now, but one of the few people that I know in the music industry that faithfully serve in their church every single weekend. And I think one of the things that we used to say all the time was, we prayed for this.
Yeah.
We prayed for this. And we used to always, like, even in times where we would like there'd be nights where we would have a Friday night show, a Saturday night show. We would end at like 1 a.m. and then we would go home and we would basically we would lay in bed, and then you would pray before you went to bed, and you'd be like, Lord, I pray that this sleep feels like 12 hours. And we would wake up at 4:30 in the morning for service to serve, and to staying like at 6 services or 4 services. And I remember like we would look at each other even like in our exhaustion, but we would just be like, you know what, we prayed for this. We prayed, we asked God, how do we do both? And he has paved the way. And I think even for like the bigger question is like, how do you and how do we continue to stay in alignment with who God is, and how do we not stray away from like who God has called us to be, And like I said earlier, like I take pride in who we are as a couple. And I'm not saying that we are like the best couple in the industry, but I love showing up to concerts together or showing up to an event. And I love that people know that when you're not going to find Bekah and Elijah doing this, or we know that we're not going to offer them this, or we know that they probably, we're going to invite them to the after party, but it's most likely they're going to Houdini and not come. And so I don't know, I just take pride in the fact that we have been able to build a firm foundation in our own personal faith so that we know how to stay in alignment to what God's called us to.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I think one of the number one things people always ask is, how do we stay grounded? Because it's real easy to get caught up in the mess of things and the dark parts of the industry. It's a great industry.
Yeah.
Great industry. I meet so many people who don't necessarily have a relationship with Jesus, but they're very integrous.
Right.
And they're still devout husbands and devout fathers. And then you got your fair share of people who don't necessarily walk in the same type of lifestyle that we walk in.
Right.
And I love them from a distance.
Yeah.
And even people that I call brothers and sisters who I used to come up doing stupid stuff with, but they recognize the growth and the change in my life.
Yeah.
And they don't ever no one ever tries to pressure me to do anything I don't want to do. And that's the beautiful thing about it. I think there's been a level of respect that's grown between me and those types of friends. But like your dad always tells us, like, you are the sixth of the 5 people you keep around you.
Right.
The 5 people you spend the most time with. And if I'm just being 100% complete honest, you won't find me out on a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday night at the late night gigs if we're off. Maybe we'll go support one of our boys. If Pono got a show, we'll go support Mr. Shant. We'll go support Lava. We'll go support Fia. But other than that, it's a rarity because I know me. Why would I go back and dabble in what God has already delivered me from? Like, it's just to flee from temptation.
Yeah.
Sometimes, you know what I mean? We're human. No matter how close we are to Jesus, how deep we are in ministry, we can fall just like that.
Yeah.
And we have to make sure that we are strong enough to flee from that temptation and set parameters and boundaries enough for us to set ourselves up for success. And so that's one of the things is, who is our circle? Even though I am known in the industry and I have a lot of friends that are, that are up there that I hang out with every so often, our main friends are not in the industry.
Right.
Our main friends are ministry friends.
That's true.
Darian, Maria, Tyler, my brother, Elias, Rachel, Hope, Grace and them, Deja them. Like, these are the people that we actually spend majority of our time with. And it's because, again, we always say it. You are the sixth of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So if I'm hanging around, and I'm just going to be blunt, if I'm hanging around with the guys in the industries that's going to the strip clubs, that's doing cocaine, that's cheating on their wives, what do you think that's going to make me eventually? One of those things, or all. And so that's why I don't do those things.
Right.
I cannot, and I will not, because of what God has brought me through and brought me to. It's something that we need to protect. We have too much to lose. And so that's why it's important that we are very, very careful and particular with our circle. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean like I took a step back and I'm like, I'm better than all those guys. No, those are my brothers. I still kick it with them. We got late night rehearsals. I go on the road. We go on tour with them. But even they know the boundaries that I set and the parameters that I set for myself. So that's one of the main things that we have to do to stay grounded, is having those specific groups of friends. And they are also our accountability. And prayer. You know what I mean? Like, when I'm on the road for 6 weeks at a time, I always got people texting me, hey, how can I pray for you? Hey, how can I pray for you? Or I'll tell them, like, look, man, the other day was loading in and some other guy came up, rolled up on us, and I wanted to slap his face. Yes, these hands pray, but these hands like slap too sometimes.
But they don't.
But they don't.
Yeah.
We can't be doing that. Slap Jesus into him. Bah! Nah, just kidding. Don't do that. Anyway.
But
yes.
I do know that we are called to this industry right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so there was I had a lady ask me one time, and she said, hey, is this what you guys are going to be doing forever? And I was like, until God calls us to not, then we'll step away. But God hasn't said anything. And I think, like, there's so many situations that happen while we're either at concerts or, like, I think even for you more so, but there's certain scenarios that happen where I like look at you and I look at the people that are coming to us, and I'm like this is why we're in this industry.
Yeah.
Like, we had a couple people call us because they need help in their relationship, or they need help figuring out what their calling is, or just having random guys that are either opening before you or just at the show that night, and they just come up and like, bro, like, I need prayer. And you're like, wait, what? Okay, like, yeah, I'll pray for you. But it's like the most random times, and it's always in the industry that a lot of people know that you're the guy.
Yeah.
Like, if I need prayer, if I need to talk to somebody, if I'm looking for a church, like, I know that I can call up Elijah, and I know that Elijah's going to hit me up. He's going to call me. He's going to pray for me. And I think, like, that's when I take a step back, and I will look at the life that we live, and I will say, this is why God has called us to this industry.
Yeah.
It's so that we can live the life that we live, but that we can be a light to everybody else. And like you said, it's not like that we're perfect, because we're not. But at the same time, like, I think it is truly accountability, and it is truly like your circle that keeps you in alignment.
Yeah.
And I think the bigger thing too is, like, we don't just go to Inspire. We also work at Inspire, but we're also like, we're so involved.
Yep.
And it's like, when you are involved, or when you're planted in a house, it's hard to get off that foundation.
Yeah.
Like, when you're planted, when you find a church, when you find a pastor, when you find that group of friends, when you join a connect group, when you are planted and rooted in the house, like, it's hard to not be in alignment with God.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to really try. You have to really remove yourself from the house if you want to be out of alignment. And I think too is, like, for us, like, when it comes to marriage, ministry, and the marketplace, like, I always want God's hand in everything that we do. I want to make sure that God's always covering us. I want to make sure that God's constantly in the music. I want to make sure that I think that's what I love about your music. And, like, your songs maybe they could be love songs, and maybe they could be written about me, but at the end of the day, there's like a hint of like Jesus in every single thing that you say.
Every song is prayed about.
Yeah.
No matter what.
Yeah.
We get in the studio, we start our writing sessions, we start with prayer.
Yeah.
And I'm always asking God to be the pen and the paper.
Right.
To give me whatever it is. And a lot of like songs I write about you. Like I also know that God put me in an industry where, to kind of let it be known, it's okay to champion your wife in public. There's like, I love writing songs about you, and I love championing you and showing you off when I'm on stage. I know you don't like that stuff. Well, you act like you don't, but I know you really do, low-key. But there's some men in our industry, especially being a Polynesian, they like act macho, and they like, oh, I'm an OG gangster, and I cannot show off my wife. I cannot let the world know I love my wife. Grow up, boy. Okay? It's okay to love your wife. It's okay to be a square for your wife. Like, and that's kind of like one of the things I love to do, especially as a bigger guy. Like, people don't like to do that, and that's like all God breathed. Like, I ask God, how can I make a difference when people listen to these songs? What kind of shifts can we make in this song? And it isn't always like right 100 right then and there 100% transformation from the heart. But it's little things chipping away at them. Like my song I Choose to Love, I talked about us, me and you, and how we would argue, and when you would try to tell me about your feelings, I would invalidate your feelings and tell you that you need to just be, have some tough skin.
No, you used to say, do you need some MU? And I would say, what is MU? And he would say, it's called man up. And I'm like, wow, okay.
Yeah, so I wrote that song, I Choose to Love, because I had a really big moment with God. And he was telling me, he's like, it is not your job to be right. It is your job to be loving. And I was like,
that's a word.
Wow. And it was like, I was only listening to respond instead of listening to comprehend what you were going through. And that's what that song is about. It's like, and it can be easily used for anything else in life. Like when you are talking with your friend and you're ironing some things out, like you had some beef or something. It's like, you will never get past that beef if you continue to just go back and forth trying to prove yourself is right. Right. You got to actually be quiet, swallow your pride, get rid of your ego, listen to what they have to say, and then choose love rather than being right all the time. And that's what that song was about. And I wholeheartedly believe God put that on my heart, because I had a moment with him where he corrected me with the way I was treating you at the time. Yeah. And even like just any other, like Beast Mode. I wrote Beast Mode based off of pound for pound principle.
Shout out.
Written by my father-in-law, our pastor, Pastor Mike Kai.
Pound
You know,
for
it
pound.
says pound for pound in beast mode, and
Yeah.
it was a season of my life where I was very complacent and sitting on the couch while everybody's at the studio writing hit songs. I was at home eating, 3 McDoubles, playing with mac sauce, large fries, large Sprite,
disgusting.
Local Deluxe breakfast platter,
Okay.
extra spam with a cinnamon roll and a hot fudge sundae.
Ew.
But everybody else was at the studio writing songs, and so when your dad was doing that pound for pound tour, where he was doing the online
Yeah, during
seminars.
COVID, yeah.
And so finally, I remember I went to go cut my hair, and I'm sitting in the parking lot. I got about 45 minutes till my haircut, and I'm tuning in. And man, your dad reminded me of the pound for pound principle, doing the best with what you've been given.
Yeah.
And it was crazy because I didn't have much to do at that time, but I had a lot of time. But I wasn't using that time to go to the studio. And so that's how Beast Mode came about.
Yeah.
That song is like when you're in beast mode, nobody can stop you.
Yeah.
Because
and then my dad started using beast mode to priest mode just in the last couple years.
yeah, I don't know if that helped at all, but I mean, your dad's just brilliant, so he probably came up with that on
Yeah,
his
yeah,
own.
yeah, yeah. He did.
But yeah, I wrote that. I even shouted out pound for pound in the verse.
Yeah.
Yeah, pound for pound, we push past through adversity. That's one of the lyrics in the song. But again, musically, everything we do, whether it's worship music
Yeah.
or songs that have been God breathed through prayer, through fasting, through
Right.
being in my word every day. That is how we keep grounded, whether it's practically, spiritually, all of those things in the music industry.
Did you ever see yourself in ministry? Obviously, you were doing music since 2016, and then now like you're in ministry. I think for me, I grew up with my parents being pastors, right? As a kid, I never wanted to be in ministry. I never wanted to work at the church. But I think like obviously as my relationship grew, that was when I was like, okay,
Your mind shifted.
yeah, like there is a call in my life. And I think the biggest thing for me is I had like this fear of God where I did not want to miss out on his blessing. And so if I had said no to an opportunity like being on ministry or being in ministry, working at Inspired Church, working with my parents and being a part of this legacy, I don't know what type of blessing I know what type of blessing I would have missed, but I would have hated to miss this blessing. And I think like for me, I never saw myself in ministry, but I always had like a feeling that I was a little different. I do feel like I was a little different than both of my sisters too. Like I'm like, okay, why do I love God so much? Like how come I always cry? Like why am I listening to worship music and I just want to like thank Jesus all the time? And I think for me it's very I didn't know, but it was a part of my legacy. So it's almost like I was birthed into ministry at the same time. And so for me, I kind of knew there was a call in my life. But what about you? You didn't grow up you didn't really grow up with parents. You grew up going to a Samoan church. Your papa was a pastor, right? But you just went.
Yeah.
You weren't really like
No, I was not.
invested.
Yeah, I wasn't at all. It was like one of those. I mean, we were there because we needed to be there, and like, I mean, obviously, it's all family. My whole church was the family. My uncle was the pastor. My grandpa was, I think he was the deacon. But yeah, we would just show up, sing, and that's how my music journey started. Was
Yeah.
singing in our alfaipese, which was our choir, and like that's how I learned how to harmonize. Cause one little flat or sharp note, you get salsa on the hand, by our grandma or our auntie or our uncle, whoever's conducting at the time. And truthfully, it was, you never really understood what a relationship with Jesus looked like. Because if I'm being honest, I didn't see any example of that or any fruitful example of that growing up. And so, no, I had no idea I would ever be in ministry. I mean, I still remember the first day I walked through these doors here at Inspire. Like, I've never been at a church like this. So I walked in and I was like, what in the world is this place?
Yeah.
Why is everybody so happy? Why? Because like again, I grew up in Samoan church. Everybody was grouchy, so it's like you walk in here, everybody happy.
Service is at 1
I
p.m.
was like, whoa, let me get a little taste of this Jesus. Everybody happy all of a sudden, and it's crazy because like everyone knows me and my personality now. I'm the irritating guy that shows up to 5:45 call time,
Just really happy.
and I'm just really happy and full of joy. But I didn't have that before because I didn't have Jesus. So it's like, in order for that part of my real personality and design that God created me to be, I needed Jesus to unlock that.
Yeah.
And now I can't get rid of it. It irritates some people, but that's okay. They need more Jesus too.
Right.
But just walking through these doors that day, I remember it's June 21st, 2017. And I was just kind of tripping first and foremost how big the church was. Walk in during worship. Of course, this is before Jesus. So I was like judging the worship team. I'm already a professional musician, so I'm like, wow, do these guys even harmonize or do they just sing melody the whole time? And I was just being super judgmental and like unnecessary thoughts going in my head. And it's like one of those things where like I remember your dad always says like the way you prepare your mind for something is the way it's gonna happen.
Wow.
So like if I came in with a different attitude and I'm like, man, I'm so excited for today to go to this church for the first time. I can't wait to see what the worship team is doing. I can't wait for the message. I probably would have walked in smiling too.
Yeah.
But I wasn't prepared for that. I already came in with the mindset like this isn't gonna work. I already came in with the mindset like, oh, it's just gonna be a waste of my time. I'm just doing it so that Bekah can talk on the phone with me next weekend when I'm driving home drunk at the wheel.
Yeah.
Just a little disclaimer. Bekah told me that night, or it was like 4:30 in the morning. She's getting ready for church. I'm on my way home. This is before Christ days. Another disclaimer. I'm driving home drunk and she's staying on the phone with me so I could get home safely. We did that for weeks at a time. And then she finally told me, I'm not going to do this anymore if you don't come to church. That's why I went to church that day on June 21st, 2017.
Yeah, I was like, I am not going to talk on the phone to a drunk person because they can't get their life together.
Yeah. So every weekend she was on the phone with me. So I finally decided to come to church. Got home around like 5:30 a.m. So I took a little nap, came to the 10-something service. And again, I just came in with a really piss poor attitude. And like, that's why I didn't receive anything.
Yeah.
I was just very judgmental. And then the next weekend I came, and that is when your mom...
We're sitting in the back.
Pastor
this
Lisa,
was before like all the seating.
Yeah,
that we
no
have
stadium
now.
seating. The chairs just went to the back. And I'm in the very last row.
I was with you, I think.
Yeah, all of our friends were sitting together, and then, well, you guys were in the row in front of me. I'm in the last seat to the left, all the way in the row, and sitting next to some random people. And I sit down, and then one of them actually asked me, "Hi, are you Johnny Sweet?"
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I am." And I was kind of embarrassed because I probably smelled like tequila and cigarettes at the time. But I'm sitting there, and your mom gets up there and preaches. And I know that's your mom, but I never met her in my life before.
And I told her about you.
Yeah, they knew about me as your friend.
As my friend and like my big brother.
Yes, big bro. So gross. But I'm sitting there and like your mom in the middle of her message, she's talking about using your gifts for the kingdom of God. And she stops in the middle of her sentence and she points me out in front of the whole church.
Yeah.
And she's like, you're my daughter's friend, Elijah, right? And I'm like...
And we're on the wing, so you're like,
who? So I'm like, who could she be talking about? She's
and
like,
then I looked at you,
the singer.
You're the only friend I have named
She's
Elijah.
like, you're the singer. And I was like, oh, no. She's like, you should be singing on this stage. And everyone was like, yeah. And in my mind, I'm like, yeah, I ain't never coming back to this church again.
Yeah. You're like, no one is... People call you out as Samoan church, but not like that.
I know. So I walk out. I'm about to beeline to the door, and I ran into her. Mm-hmm. And she was like... Obviously, if you know Pastor Lisa, she wasn't sorry.
Yeah. She was on a mission.
She's probably a little sorry for embarrassing me, but she wasn't sorry for pulling the gold out of me.
Yeah.
And she was like, you should be on this worship team. What do you think? And I was like, oh, I don't know. I'm still like in the world, doing all these worldly things. And she encouraged me just to try serving somewhere.
Yeah.
And that's when I said yes to serving on the resource team. With Bekah. She was overseeing the resources, and so she had me come in on Sundays at the last service to come in and sell books and shirts and stuff like that. And that's kind of how my journey started with serving in general.
Yeah.
And as I started to come every Sunday, she would tell me to come in come for 12:45 service or 12:15 service. I was like, okay. Then she's like, can you do 10:30 and 12:15 service? So now my head's spinning. I'm like, okay, now
He was like, dang, girl.
dang, I gotta get home like maybe 1 hour earlier next weekend. And then she asked me to do all 3 services, 8:45, and I'm like, okay, that means I cannot. And this again, full transparency before Jesus. So I was like, okay, maybe I cannot have 12 beers tomorrow. Maybe I can only have 6 beers then. Okay, just 6 beers. Then she's like, can you do all 4 services? I was like, oh, I guess I can only drink Friday then. I cannot drink Saturday. So I guess I cannot drink Saturday because I got to be at church early Sunday. And that's how it was, bro. That is like my real authentic story.
And then we're still friends.
Yes.
A Rise conference was coming up. And I bribed you and I said, hey, we need someone to serve in resources at a Rise conference. You're like, what's a Rise? I'm like, oh, it's a women's conference. You should come.
Yeah.
I was like, there's a lot of single ladies. The single ladies love to buy.
You know me, I signed up real quick. Yeah.
I literally was like, there's a lot of single ladies at a Rise. And you know, ladies, they love to buy stuff.
Yep.
And if you're selling them, you get to see them. And you're like, okay, sign me up. And I said,
So
all
I
right.
brushed my teeth twice that morning.
Yeah. Good for you. Yeah. I remember this because Lisa Bevere was speaking that conference, and then you were selling her books. And I remember meeting you at the resource table, and I'm checking on you. I'm like, are you good? Are you good? Did you look anybody the wrong way? Like, are you okay? Like, are you irritated? And it's because I knew your personality at the time.
Yeah.
And that's crazy. That was your first Arise conference. So you were selling resources at Arise in 2018. And then you are now leading worship.
Yeah.
At Arise conference for about 6 years in a row now.
About 4 or 5 years in a row.
Yeah,
but
that's wild.
it's crazy, the journey, how it began, and like.
Yeah. So you never saw yourself in ministry?
No, never in a million years.
What was that? Maybe I don't even know, but what was that like thing that unlocked that? Man, I think I can do this. Like, I think I am called into doing ministry, and I can do both.
Honestly, when I first started doing, like, when I was serving in ministry, I wasn't super like excited about it all the time. But again, my heart, God was really refining my heart. It wasn't until I feel like I got around my real true friends in church. Because even in coming here for the first 2 to 3 years, maybe 2 years, to be honest, like, being on the worship team was just being on the worship team on a Sunday. I didn't hang out with them throughout the week.
Right.
They weren't the people I was calling. They weren't the people I would ask for prayer. Matter of fact, I wasn't even really asking for prayer during that time because I didn't really feel that close with the worship team at the time. And when Darian took over, when Darian was put in place of being the worship director, that is when my heart and my mind started to shift. I love my old worship leaders, love them so much. I honor them. But Darian brought me in close. Yeah. He brought me in close. He started to kind of tap into my mind and like try to see where I could help the worship team on a bigger scale. Instead of just showing up on a Sunday to sing, now it's like, hey, you think you could like teach harmonies?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Or you think you can work with the band and the MDs and some gospel arrangement stuff? And I'm like, oh, yeah, for sure. So getting me more and more involved, that's when I grew so much closer to the worship team. Yeah. And like grew. I've been serving with Grayson for so many years, but we didn't even really get close until 2 years ago.
That's right.
Is when me and Grayson really grew as brothers. And like that's like one of my best friends now.
Yeah. And
like it was in the closeness of those types of relationships that I really started to believe that I belong here. And that's essentially what we preach here. Like, relationships are everything. Like, you want people to know their full calling. Like, it's gonna be through God, and oftentimes God is gonna use us to get through to other people and get them and pull the gold out of them. And I believe wholeheartedly it's in these relationships that the gold was pulled out of me. Yeah. Like Darian, Grayson, Tracy, cousin Rachel, like people who have been serving for so long who were definitely pulling the gold out of me. And like, it made me step up and lead in a way that I've never led before. Yeah. And like, it was during those times where God started to reveal to me like, wow, this is there's a place for you here.
Right.
And even more so, like, God would reveal to me, like, there's a way that we can make it work in both places.
Yeah.
You know, and I thank God for the grace and the mercy and even the belief that in my vision that I have with Johnny Sweet that your parents have in me, and allowing me to go and do my thing and still be a part of what we have going on here.
Yeah. I think too, it's very, it's a different style of not just mentorship, but it's like coming alongside people and what they do in the marketplace, but still nurturing the gift of leadership and anointing that is on that person. And I think that's what I appreciate most about this house, is that we have so many different entrepreneurs on staff, different people who do different avenues of work, but also still in ministry, but we still know how to nurture all those different gifts. And I think for me, honestly, I was nervous in the beginning when we were dating. I was nervous, and I was so in love with Jesus. I was coming back home to God, and I was so in love with him. And I remember we were finally dating, and I felt like there was a call of God in your life, but I was nervous about you knowing the call of God in your life. And I was like, oh man, like, I want to marry this man, but I want to make sure that our futures are in alignment. Because one thing my mom always said too was, like, the person that you marry, he has to be in alignment with your purpose. And I remember hearing that, and I knew, so it's almost like I knew that there was a call of God in your life, but I also just wanted to make sure that you knew that there was a call of God. Because if you didn't know yourself and you didn't walk into all that God had created you to be, like, it would make no sense.
Yep.
It wouldn't have worked.
Absolutely.
And so I think that there, like, had to have been this, like, awakening in your spirit and in your heart where God is like, Elijah, like, I have like the world for you. Like, you thought you had to choose. No, I got 1 and 2 for you, and I got a 3rd. You know, I got so much for you. And I think, like, just being, like, your wife now and seeing the life that we get to live, like, for people who follow me on Instagram, I always say, like, I love my life. Like, I love my life, and thank you, Jesus, for this life. I say that all the time, but it's so true, though. Because I'm like, I just trip. I'm like, man, like, in a season where I didn't know if Elijah knew the call of God in his life, and I was unsure if he would walk into it. And then in a season of life where I was like, man, like, now we're married, he found his calling, but do we have to choose? And I remember, like, just feeling, I'm like, man, I don't want to choose. And I feel like along the way, we've met more people from other churches who are in like the marketplace workforce, and then also, like, people who are also in ministry. Like, we met, like, Karina, who is an influencer, but she's also a pastor. And then we've met, like, Pastor Tom from Freedom House, and he's in real estate, but he's also a pastor. And it's like wild to see that, like, this new generation of, like, upcoming and rising, like, people in ministry, there is multiple ways that you can still be in the house and still have different callings. But
at the end of the day, I think the beautiful thing of all the people that you named and what we got going on with Johnny Sweet, at the end of the day, it all points towards God, no matter what. Because it's the moment that,
and that's how you stay in alignment.
Yeah, you have to.
Sure everything
it's the
points.
moment that our stuff outside of ministry starts to point in a different direction is where it's gonna get really hard.
Right.
And that's why, like, oftentimes we gotta check ourselves. Like, I had to, man. I deal with envy from time to time with other artists who's getting all these tour opportunities or gets to go on the road or gets to do all these things. But then I gotta always check my heart and ask God for forgiveness to scrub my heart of envy.
Yeah.
Because it's dangerous. That's a dangerous place to be. But I'm human. You know what I mean? I got wants and I got desires. But at the end of the day, like, I always got to remind myself. And you remind me all the time, too. It's like, God's doors are better. That there might be doors that I hoped open for me that God didn't open it. A matter of fact, God might have protected me from those doors by keeping it closed. But then in time, his doors will be open. And that's what I mean, where, like, I can easily be swayed by the desires of my heart that's not in alignment with God's heart.
Right.
And then go in that direction. And then that's when the ministry and my brand is going to be hard to balance.
Right.
Because it was never in God's intentions or intentions for his plan for my life anyway. And I I cannot let envy be the drive behind me taking things out of God's hands and trying to take it into my own.
Yeah.
Otherwise, nothing will be in alignment. So even though sometimes from the outside looking in, it might look like things are going slow for me musically, but it's not. It's really just
Right.
waiting and working behind the scenes, making sure we're around the right people, making sure we're putting out great music,
Yeah.
and just waiting for God to open the right
But
doors.
that's like what we talked about last night at Young Adults. We did that panel and we talked about how people who are just in a waiting season and how we like one of the questions was like, oh, what can we do for waiting?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, then like go run after God, pursue Him, and then
Yep.
talking about delighting yourself in the Lord, like about this desires. Like Proverbs talks about how if you delight yourself in the Lord, He'll give you the desires of your heart. And so if you delight in the Lord, your desires start to shift.
Yep.
It's almost like you only want what God wants for you,
Yep,
and you
exactly.
no longer have like this flesh or selfish desire
Yeah.
to want. Oh, I want this stage. Oh, I want to go to that tour.
Yeah.
I want to be on that platform. And now it's more like I only want the stage that God wants to put me on. And if
Yeah.
the stage that God puts me on right now is going to be the church stage, then praise the Lord, because there's favor and there's blessing in waiting.
There
and,
really is.
And I think that has a lot to do with being in alignment, staying in alignment with all things that you do in your life. And whether you're waiting, whether you are trying to pursue something or you're trying to wait for that blessing, it's like the more that you delight yourself in God, the more that you seek after Him, the more that you read His word and you are in community and you're under a covering that you trust and that you love and that you can take correction.
Yeah.
It's like that's where the favor is. And I think ultimately, like, one thing that I think that we've learned just doing all things music and ministry is we had to learn how to take correction. We had to learn how to take the back seat sometimes. We had to learn how to lower our pride and be okay with maybe just chilling for a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think like that's what sometimes like that those are the seasons. And like people always talk about the waiting season or the dry season, or people talk about what does that look like. And I shared this last night at Young Adults too, but like even like your song Wilderness, like that song, like people love that song, and I don't know how many people know that song is actually from the Bible.
Yeah.
Like it's biblical. And I think I remember even telling everybody last night that like someone said, oh, why did you choose Elijah? Like, how did you know that he was the one? And I was like, well, yeah, I already knew that he did music. I knew that he could sing. I knew that he was a great guy. But at the end of the day, like it was from watching you go from Egypt to wilderness to headed towards the promised land.
Yeah.
And like that was my favorite part, is like you're in the wilderness possibly, but you are knowing that God is never going to run out on you, that God's always going to provide, and that no matter what, like God's going to take you out of the wilderness and into the promised land. And I think that is something that I'm constantly reminded of, that even in waiting seasons, even in seasons where, we're like, okay, God, where's the opportunity? Where's the next show? Where's the next venue? And in times where we're waiting, like God's like reminding me, like, no, you're in a wilderness desert right now, but don't worry, because I'm going to bring the quail. I'm going to bring the water. The drought's not going to be dry anymore. And like, if you just take what I give you for today, because in Exodus, like God told Moses and the Israelites, like when there was no rain, no food, no water, no nothing. And God literally said in His word, He said, don't store up for tomorrow. He said, when I bring you the food, when I bring you water, when I bring you quail, don't save it for the next day. Just eat what I'm giving you today. And some people, they saved food because they were worried.
Yep.
They stored up that food and that water because they were worried that they weren't going to get it the next day. And what happened to that? It went rotten.
Yep.
And it dried up. And so it's like God is like reminding me as your wife constantly to like encourage you in that, of like, even when we're waiting, like don't just store up for tomorrow. Like just take what I give you today and be obedient with what I give you today, and just reap that, so that tomorrow you can trust me for the next day and the next day and the next day. And I think that's like a word for somebody too that's listening, that no matter where you are in this season, that God is trustworthy, that you can love him, that you can honor him, and that he always comes through. And so I think ultimately this podcast was really more about just what it looks like for us to stay in alignment. And I think we hit on a lot of community, making sure you have good accountability, being planted in a church. And, you know, it's hard sometimes, for sure. Like, there's times, honestly, I wake up on a Sunday and I'm like, I don't want to go to church. I just want to lay in bed, have brunch somewhere, and stay in my pajamas and not do anything. But I understand, and I know, like, and I have to remind myself every day, like, there's a call of God on my life, and there's a call of God on this marriage. And I think we've seen the fruit, too, of, like, the obedience.
We sure have.
Like, just in our personal lives, but even just in our ministry life. Like, my gosh, like, young adults was so packed last night. I sat in our living room this morning, and you were sleeping. I went outside, sitting on the couch.
You don't tell everybody I was sleeping.
You were sleeping.
I was praying with my eyes closed.
You were sleeping. And I went outside to the living room, and I just started just, like, looking at a video that I took last night at young adults, and I was just tearing up because I'm like, dang, like, this is, like, all because we're obedient. All because we're obedient. Like, that's all God's ever called us to, is obedience. It was like, just be obedient and trust me, and, like, just watch what I can do. And so it's like, if God can do that with a ministry, that means God can do that with our own lives, and God can do that in your workforce, in your workplace, in the industry that you're in, and in your families. And so I have to be reminded, and last night reminded me that, like, God is faithful no matter what.
All the time.
When you are obedient, there's favor, there's blessing. And I don't ever want us to miss out on God's best because we decided that we were going to be lazy, or that we were, you know, going to be complacent.
Yeah. That's good, babe.
But this was good.
It's good.
Shout out to my mom for letting us be
Mom.
letting us be on the I Am Her podcast. I am her.
I am him.
But yeah, anyways, good job, babe. Hey ladies, wasn't that an awesome episode? I'm super excited that Pastor Lisa allowed us to have the honor of being on her platform. We were super excited and nervous, but I'm super glad that I was able to share my husband with everybody. And I hope that you enjoyed this episode. If you did, go ahead and make sure you like and comment and share this episode with everyone you know. And I hope you guys have an amazing month. We can't wait to see you at the next I Am Her podcast.